Hello. So I was told I should, I guess, create an introductory video of some kind, something to introduce myself a little bit, tell my story. I don't really like doing this personally, so I might go over it a bit. If anyone's interested in a specific aspect of what I'm going to bring up, I'm probably going to glean over a lot of stuff. Just tell me, maybe I'll do a future video or fill you in on some details one-on-one. So yeah, I'm 24. I was pretty much born sick, born jaundiced, and then I started showing signs of eczema and chronic pain from the age of about 7 months, if not a little bit before that. It wasn't so bad for the first few years of my life, just some obvious food intolerances. My parents didn't usually let me consume milk. When I did, I had the most horrible fucking migraines, but things got worse over time, probably around the age 4 or 5. The eczema and allergies just kept getting worse and worse and worse. During the change of seasons, I would often be up all night, my nose blocked, I would have crust all over my eyes. It would take me a good 5 minutes to open them, to like break them open, and my eczema would be so bad at times that I would literally be bleeding freely out of them, and I would have to use blankets to hold them closed. I didn't really want my parents noticing, so I would get a lot of paper towels and cover them up until the night was over, and then throw them out in the back alley. That wasn't constant, but it was a lot of stuff like that, a lot of stomach aches, just general. I mean, being depressed at 5 years old is actually more of a common thing now than a lot of people realize, but it shouldn't be. Getting like deep existential dread, asking myself, luckily in a sense it paid off in the sense that I started asking myself a lot of big questions early, but it sure wasn't fun. It was very difficult to socialize. It appears that my vagus nerve, I'll get into that more in detail later on, was probably damaged at an early age. A large part of what that allows you to do is relate to other people. You can do fairly well one-on-one, but then in groups you can get a little overwhelmed, or you read people differently than other people do, and your body language tends to be a little bit different and can be a little off-putting to people. So it's hard to relate to people. Also, being in pain a lot of the time, it's very distracting. It's hard to get a decent conversation going unless you're fairly present. So God, like early high school was fucking hell. Not that that's like special at all. But luckily around 13 or 14, my mother got me the blood type diet book. I don't suggest people take advice from the blood type diet, but it just so happened that I was blood type O. Hey, I don't know if anyone can see. Type O negative. That's a band, but anyways. And the recommended diet for type O is higher in meat, less wheat and dairy. So I cut out a lot of the wheat and dairy, and that helped a lot. The lighting is a little weird. So I lost a lot of weight. I was kind of chubby for most of my childhood. I'd gone to a lot of doctors. I saw a lot of practitioners. Very little helped. Occasionally a little something. Did a little something, but that was shocking. Cutting out the wheat and the dairy, and there was also potatoes and tomatoes. I used to be addicted to fries and ketchup. That was just like practically the only food I wanted to eat as a kid. But it just blew my mind how much change came about from that. I got really skinny. I grew. I mean, that's puberty too. But most of my eczema went away. I mean, I still had fatigue and I was fairly depressed and anxious. But at that point, it just got me addicted to this health stuff. I was 13, 14, so it's been over a decade. I've been reading. Whenever I could, I would go out of my way to work to make extra money to buy more books or get consultations, lab testing overseas. You send either your bodily fluids in the mail and get results and stuff like that. And unfortunately, like 90% of the shit barely did anything. I learned a lot. And again, I say again, but it's because I say these things so much and I feel the need to say them so much because it seems like people forget every 2 seconds. Maybe some of these things work great for some people, but it didn't for me. Anyways, must have been around 15 or so, I started dabbling with veganism. I thought it was just the wheat and the dairy that I had to avoid. Didn't realize that meat had helped a lot. I tried a short paleo stint, but it was high protein, low fat, and that can be nasty. You lose a lot of weight, you feel great at first, but then it can be rough on the immune system. You can get pretty dehydrated. So I was like, oh, okay, this whole meat thing's not the thing. And veganism was getting popular. At first, it was great. I mean, I started in summer. I was running around barefoot all the time on the mountain that we got near here in the forest, and I was working out like fucking crazy. I think it was like minimum 3 hours a day on average for a few years there. I was very vain. I just felt good to finally, sort of look decent and feel like I was in shape. But it didn't take long before I started having problems. I just kept trying to tweak things. At first it was just no meat, no wheat, no dairy, or potatoes or tomatoes. Those were my only rules. Then I learned more and more about veganism, went from this to that. But it just kept going downhill. Every time I made a change, it got a little bit better. And then the general trend overall was down. For the last year, just over a year and a half of that experience, I was fruitarian, and God, I love that, because that's another problem I had. I love to eat, and I could just eat non-stop most of my life. I've probably done a lot of damage to myself, stretching my stomach out. I could be stuffed and still want to eat and feel totally sick. And what was fun about fruitarianism was I could eat all the time and still stay very thin, and it was a lot of sweet fruits. You get the sugar rush all the time, but as soon as winter came along, holy shit, that went downhill. But my fatigue came back pretty quickly within the first couple of months. But my eczema, it wasn't so much bloody as dry. They covered my arms. I don't know how my girlfriend at the time tolerated me. God. Anyways, it was horrible. I couldn't stop itching. I barely slept that night again. I covered my arms up with bandages so I wouldn't itch so much. I looked ridiculous. I just looked sick. And at some point before that, I had traveled around Canada hitchhiking, and I stayed briefly on a lot of reserves, met a lot of different native groups, some of them more traditional than others, and there's a couple of cases where I met some very interesting people who taught me about eating raw meat. At the time, I believed in the whole raw concept, but I didn't believe in meat, so I kind of went over that. But once I got really sick through the fruitarianism, I had to try something. I kept trying things, and I was desperate. And raw meat sounded crazy, but I thought, hey, sushi's a common thing. The Japanese are pretty healthy, so I started doing raw fish a lot. And holy shit, again, that was like another one of those moments. I've had a few of these moments where I change something in my health, and the whole world just turns on its head. It's it's amazing. Like I started with smoked salmon. It's not really raw, but felt so good. But I started moving further and further away from the fruit. I saw that as long as I had them in my diet, I seemed to have reactions. Again, not bashing fruit as a whole. This is my particular case. And then including more and more raw fish. Little by little, I tried rare meats and then raw. It's more of a thing than a lot of people might think. It might sound crazy, but you go for really good quality stuff, and if you do it right, it's perfectly safe. It really is. I've been doing this for more than 4 years now, and it's never made me sick. The only times I've gotten sick were from other experiments I've tried outside of it. Anyways, so yeah, I've been on sort of that kind of diet. I keep trying things. I believe in always trying things. Being open, it could be that I'm completely insane and I'm killing myself doing this, and I'm open to that too. But I've been helping people more and more online. A lot of people have reached out to me, mostly friends, because I've updated here and there through social media about my health situations, and sometimes people have come to me, old friends, and asked for advice, and I've been able to help them, not just with raw meat. Doesn't mean if you come to me for advice, doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily recommend just raw meat to you. There's a lot of variety. I try to work with people to find what works for them. But this isn't completely insane. It might seem that way, but it's helped a lot of people. You can find there's a guy, A. Jonas van der Planet, it's his crazy name, but a lot of people have gotten incredible results through his advice. And I've tried a lot of other modalities, mostly ketogenic diets. I've been playing around more and more with fasting and getting very interesting results, learning enormous about that stuff, enormous amount. I'm studying under a practitioner. She was originally a well-renowned biophysicist, Judy-Ann McNamara. She was big in research, and she's both treating me and teaching me a lot. And the whole biophysics aspect of this stuff, how light and even certain psychological things, aspects, how electricity, dirty electricity, sound, are perspectives. There's the neurological aspect of biophysics as well, how the mitochondria work. It's a whole rabbit hole, but I'm learning more and more, and things are improving. Other than that, that's most of what I have to say in regards to those things. Alongside to all that, I was raised in a very spiritual. I don't like that word. It's too loaded. But a spiritual family. My mother teaches Vedic philosophy. The Vedas are some of the oldest spiritual scriptures ever found. Most spirituality roots off of Veda, even Tantra, and then the Kabbalah is another tradition that most religions came out of, but they can be connected. And there are a lot of similarities. Anyways, it's not so much like, you have an eternal soul that is a magical ghost and blah blah blah. It gets more into contemplation of what consciousness is, what reality is, psychology. Anyways, I've always had this spiritual practice alongside it. We would go every summer to a retreat where there's a Vedic teacher and guru. I hate that term too. Guru Mai, near New York. I'm up in Canada, by the way, if you've ever heard of it. But I've found more and more correlations between health and spirituality. I'm going to find another term for it or something. I don't like making up words because then that gets almost cultish. But I'm going to have to make a whole video on what I mean specifically by spirituality. but I guess self-contemplation and so and so. All of these things are connecting more and more and more, and it's very it's fascinating, and I've gotten an enormous amount of benefit out of that. I see a difference in my blood tests when I'm doing certain practices, and I'm sticking to certain disciplines that may seem very just straight up psychological, but it's amazing. There's research say journaling 20 minutes a day has had a shown marked improvement on people's immune systems. Just being close to people, having a real sense of connection with someone, petting your dog, playing music, all of these things. It's all the same thing ultimately. That we're trying to find like the answer to life. Well, I'm not saying that I have it, but I'm going to be tackling a lot of things surrounding that. And I think I have some experience that may be of value to people, to you, hopefully. It seems I've had a lot of people come and thank me for my advice and my help. So at this point, I don't like imposing my opinion on the world, and I don't feel like I'm really doing that, but at this point I feel like I have to, because well, you gotta have a purpose. That's another thing. Longevity is associated with a sense of purpose, and I guess I should keep nurturing that. So that's where I'm at now. That's my story for the most part. I also really love playing music. I read a lot. I like long walks on the beach. I don't know. I'm a pretty normal dude. Have a good one, everyone.